Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I'm your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan, and today is episode 195. We are going to take a look at the United Mine Workers of America, also known as UMW or UMWA. It is a North American trade union best known for representing coal miners. However, they have expanded to other industries, which I'm not a fan of. But let me go over just the demographics here. They were founded January 25th, 1890, so they go back quite a ways. They were founded in Columbus, Ohio. They are headquartered in Virginia. Now, they do have two locations in terms of countries, so this is an international union. Again, I'm not a fan of that because I think it leads to problems with trying to effectively have our workers have really good wages, even though we are not Canadians, we are Americans, and Canada is socialist, we are not, we are capitalist. And so they have locations in the United States and Canada. In terms of membership, they have about 80,000 members. Their president is Cecil Roberts. He's been president since 1995. I think that's way too long, but this organization is very similar to many other trade unions where they do not have term limits, and that's a big reason why they tend to have issues. They don't have a change of management. It would be like if we had a president that stayed in office for like 40 years. You have like a Fidel Castro or a Stalin, and we don't need that, not by any means. And I think these organizations, I would be more impressed with trade unions if they actually had term limits, because when you have term limits, then you're able to renew and have innovations within your organization, even though this is a trade union and they don't actually invent anything, not by any means. They just work the jobs within the private sector that handle that particular type of work. But here's the thing, if you never have a change of scenery, then you're not going to know anything outside of what you've seen all these years. It's kind of like people living in a bubble. Say, for example, I'll just use me as an example. Let's say, I live in Oklahoma, which I do. I am in Oklahoma City. But let's say I never ever leave. Like I never go see Canada. I never go to other countries. Let's say I never go to other states. Well, then all I know basically is where I'm from. Like my life experience does not include anything outside of what I know in my front yard and my backyard. I think that's a very limited way of living. It's not how we're supposed to live, and I think it leads to a lack of having culture in your life. So by all means, do travel and have fun. In terms of affiliations, this union is unfortunately affiliated with the AFL-CIO, which is a very large conglomerate. Not a big fan of them. I hope and pray that they are broken up because they do act very much like a monopoly. I'm not a big fan of monopolies, whether they are in the public sector or the private sector or trade unions, whatever the case may be. Monopolies are illegal in the United States, but unfortunately, for some reason, it's hard to take people to federal court now if you go after them for having a monopoly. So I don't understand why the Federal Trade Commission doesn't handle more of that stuff. I don't understand why they don't go after more people that misbehave like that. I mean, I'm not a fan of having court cases and having legal issues for anyone. But I'm saying that, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, they have a responsibility to break up any and all monopolies. But they are willingly and knowingly turning a blind eye to trade unions. And I think that is a huge mistake because trade unions do not understand capitalism, and they don't like capitalism because they don't like being held accountable for their work or their goods. They just want the money. And this has led to a lot of inflation. I mean, just think about the cost of the goods that you're purchasing at Walmart and Target and grocery stores in general. I mean, I think, where I live in Oklahoma City, I'm near a Sam's Club and a Costco. From what I can tell, whenever I drive by, going to and from work or running errands, whatever the case may be, I've noticed a huge increase in people shopping at Costco and Sam's Club because they need and want the wholesale prices. They can't afford some of the stuff that they normally buy at a Target or a Walmart or CVS or Walgreens and things of that nature. And I think that's really sad. I mean, I'm all for people having a membership to Costco or Sam's Club, both, whatever the case may be. But, if I notice a huge increase in people that are shopping there just by driving by, to me that tells me a lot of families are really pinching pennies right now. And that's really sad. And so, needless to say, the majority of the United States understands, basically our economy, and things go up and things go down, especially in regards to inflation and gas prices and things of that nature. But trade unions like this one, they don't understand. They don't understand economics. I'm trying to be as nice about this as possible. I'm not trying to be mean, but I'm just saying that sometimes I feel like when looking at these trade unions, I feel like I'm just a repeating record in regards to what they don't understand. Because time and time again, these trade unions do not understand economics. They do not understand supply and demand. They do not understand capitalism. In fact, they hate it. They distrust it. And that is very much why they are communists and fascists. They do not believe that the power is with the people. They don't understand democracy. They very much like to infiltrate and affect our elections, and this labor union is no different, because they are affiliated with the AFL-CIO, and they are also affiliated with the CLC, which is the Canadian Labour Congress, and we will discuss that one when we have completed all of the unions that were founded in the United States. But needless to say, this labor union, they started out, I can't necessarily say with good intentions, because a lot of these trade unions were started by fascists that immigrated over here to the United States, and so they very much have a communist way of looking at things, and I think that is very much a dangerous ideology to have, especially in regards to working in a capitalistic society, because they don't really, here's the thing. If you believe that communism is the answer to your problems, you have not read history. You do not understand what the Soviet Union went through and what their people went through. Like, millions of people died from starvation because the communist government controlled everything, including the cost, the supply and demand of goods, basically at grocery stores. That is exactly how trade unions act and behave. They think they know more than everybody else, and they do not. And they think that they should run these companies that they work at when they don't actually own the company, they just work there. See, that's the problem. Communism and Marxism and fascism, they very much want to take over your company. See, because again, under communism and Marxism, they believe in the collective. They don't believe in individual rights. So that's why trade unions do not really understand what it means to live and work in America. They do not understand it. Even if they were born and raised in America, it's just this dysfunctional thinking that they do not understand the very country that is helping them to have a job and actually helping them to make really good money and make more money than other workers that work in the exact same industry, but yet they have the audacity to complain. It's like, you gotta be kidding me. But anyway, some of the things that kind of took me aback was that this labor union represents not just coal miners these days, which I find kind of odd. Now they represent healthcare workers, truck drivers, manufacturing workers, and public employees. People that work in the public sector, basically government jobs in the United States and Canada. That, to me, is a legal issue. Because a lot of public employees, they already have a federal trade union that goes to bat for them for their bargaining contracts. So I just wonder if they are joining multiple labor unions and affecting our, the cost of goods and the cost of services. I mean, just think about how expensive our healthcare costs are. Well, one reason why is because we have a lot of people that don't understand healthcare, and they think that healthcare should be free. Healthcare is not free, even under universal healthcare. Even in socialized medicine, it is not free. It costs everybody a lot of money. The reason why is because under socialized medicine and under universal healthcare, you are not seen as an individual. You are seen as a collective. This is why in Europe, they don't have as many specialists as we do, because they don't have a specialized medical care like we do. Like, they don't have privatized medicine. It's only under privatized medicine that you have better health care. But see, here's the thing. the cost of our health care, what I've seen on my end of things, and I live in Oklahoma, and I purchased my own health insurance. Every time health insurance has gone up, the federal government has done something in terms of mandates or laws. So the government has done something to try and take over the healthcare industry and punish insurance companies, and so then they have to raise their rates to make up the difference of that cost. So the more government intervenes in our healthcare, the higher the rate of expenses. Examples of this is Medicare and Medicaid, which I think we can all agree they both suck. Why? Because they're regulated and mandated by the federal government. The federal government cannot even operate a DMV. So why would you trust them with your cardiologist or your blood work or a triple bypass surgery or something? Like, you need to be careful who you put in charge of what. What's interesting is that this labor union, they advocate for better roads, schools, and universal health care. None of those things have to deal with coal mining. See, this is very unfortunate that a trade union is trying to get involved in things they have no business being involved in. So that's where I get concerned with trade unions, where they try and get more and more political. And oftentimes they get involved in stuff just so they look good. Just so it looks like they care. So, let's take a look at this for a moment. They advocate for better roads. Well, trade unions are not in charge of roads. That's the Department of Transportation of your state. And it's funded and operated by tax dollars. I don't think the Department of Transportation needs help from a coal mining union that doesn't even understand supply and demand, and they go on strike all the time. Like, here's the thing. This union is in no position to give advice to the Department of Transportation or anyone who's laying down cement or gravel or whatever the case may be. It's not their specialty. It's not what they predominantly work in, and it's not what they were founded on. It says here they also advocate for schools. Again, that has nothing to do with their trade union. Schools have to deal with the Department of Education, which technically is a federal and a state level. So the Department of Education, one of those agencies is a federal agency, and there is a higher education department as well. So here's the thing. You have federal tax dollars and state tax dollars that are used for schools. None of that has to deal with the trade union, especially this one. The only thing I can think of in regards to school is maybe like a teachers union. But teachers unions, they're just there for the money. They're not there to help actually get kids to read more or read quicker or learn more. It's about their wages and their benefits. The other thing that this group advocates for is universal health care. Universal health care sucks. It's not good. People actually immigrate to the United States because we have privatized healthcare, and they can actually purchase what they need, what they want, when they need it. In every other country on the planet, especially when they have socialized medicine or universal healthcare, you have waiting lists and delays. Universal healthcare is only good if you're young, fit, and healthy, and you never go to the doctor. At some point, you have to go to the doctor for something. I mean, it's just how it is, even if it's not for something as serious as like cancer or something. But here's the thing. It's very typical for universal health care to not have specialties anymore. So they basically try and pawn you off to all these nurses that are not doctors. That is exactly what is taking place in Europe, specifically the UK. And I find that to be very disturbing because in universal health care and socialized medicine, you're paying for that very health care that you are not receiving when you need it. But see, here's the thing. Government cannot even balance its budget. So why would you put it in charge of your health care? It makes no sense to me. government does not even understand its own tax code, but yet it implements its own tax code and tries to audit people all the time. Sometimes justly, sometimes unjustly, whatever the case may be. But here's the thing, your health care belongs to you. It's a private matter. It's not a universal matter. It's a private matter. It is between you and your doctor. But under socialized medicine, aka universal health care, there's lack of privacy, and there's lack of access to medical care, and there's lack of access to prescribed medicines that you need, specifically the more expensive ones that treat more serious conditions and diseases. See, the way that universal health care stays afloat is it denies people access to health care. Do you really want to be denied that? I find it very odd that a trade union that has really cushy benefits would be for universal health care, because I guarantee you they would not like universal health care at all. So I don't understand why they think that they have a valid opinion or a say-so on better roads, schools, and universal health care. Like, that's not their industry. And what's interesting is that I think the way that they try and get involved is they allow different types of people within their work. Let me rephrase that. They allow different types of jobs and people that work those jobs to then join their union, which would make sense as to why now they have healthcare workers, truck drivers, manufacturing workers, and public employees. None of those have anything to do with mine working. None of it. It has nothing to do with coal mining. So needless to say, a lot of these workers that are union members, they're just being used for their union dues. And I think that's very sad. I think it's very sad. So needless to say, their union goes back quite a ways. But, it does go back to the turn of the century, but what you have to remember is that times were very different back then. You have the Industrial Revolution. You have a lot of labor unions that are being founded by fascists and communists. And so you have a lot of groups that are merging and also being created. And so you have this happening underneath the watch and under the umbrella of the AFL and the CIO. So you have all these different labor unions that are trying to take over different companies within the private sector, and that's what this union wanted to do. And they actually made a constitution of their own. In their constitution, in the preamble, it says, "We have founded the United Mine Workers of America for the purpose of educating all mine workers in America to realize the necessity of unity of action and purpose," get this, "in demanding and securing by lawful means the just fruits of our toil." Here's the thing. They are in no position to demand anything unless it's something that is breaking the law, which some of their strikes have been about companies and I guess the people that operate on site at these mines. They were, I guess, mine workers. They get paid by the pound, at least they did back then. I don't know if they still do. And so these operators working on site at these mines, they were gypping the workers by affecting the weights and the scales of these weights or whatever. And so that is very much gypping someone. That is a state offense. Well, technically that is a criminal offense and a federal offense. So needless to say, that's not a workplace issue per se. That's something that you take up with the federal government. And also, you can press charges at a state level via your prosecutor within your area. See, because here's the thing. That's not something that occurs no matter what at every place of employment. But unfortunately, these trade unions, they make it seem like it happens everywhere, all the time, it's all bad. See, they kind of have a all or nothing mindset, and that's not very mature. That's very childlike thinking. It's not very educated thinking. Because to think that every employer is bad is just stupid. Like for example, I live in Oklahoma, which which is an at-will state. And yes, I've worked for some bad people that I did not enjoy working for. And times can be tough here in Oklahoma, but not every employer is bad. Just because I've had one bad experience over here that doesn't mean everybody's bad. That's not what that means. But trade unions, they like to group people like that. They like to, punish everybody at the same level. And technically you can't legally do that. And plus here's another thing, you're not supposed to morally do that. Like you can't blame somebody else for what someone else did. It just doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? It's like the sins of our fathers. Like the French Revolution. So, that's really not a good mindset to have. You need to use common sense. But some of the things that they had in their Constitution is, it says here, their Constitution listed 11 points as the union's goals. Some of these are really good. A couple are kind of weird and go against democracy and capitalism, because obviously they're a trade union. They do not understand the economy. So the first one is payment of a salary that represents or compensates with the dangerous working conditions. So basically, be compensated for the work that they do, especially considering that it is dangerous. The next one is payment to be made fairly in legal tender, not with company script. I agree with that. Next is provide safe working conditions with operators to use the latest technologies in order to preserve the lives and health of workers. Here's the thing. I'm all for that, but here's the thing. A lot of work around the turn of the century was dangerous anyway, just because stuff had not been invented yet. So yes, that's a good goal, but one of the bad things about something like this, when you put something like that in the Constitution, in your Constitution for your organization, it makes it seem like all places of work don't care about their employees and all of them don't care about having the latest technologies, which is not true. Almost all jobs around this time were dangerous. It didn't matter if you worked in coal mining or, you worked in, dustbins, or maybe you handled the trash, or maybe you worked on a railroad, whatever the case may be. Almost all jobs around this time had some element of it not being safe. It's just that the industry had to grow and change to catch up with safety. That's typically what happened here. The next goal was provide better ventilation systems to decrease black lung disease and better drainage systems. I agree with that. Next one is enforce safety laws and make it illegal for mines to have inadequate roof supports or contaminate air and water in the mines. I agree with that because that should be common sense. Next one is limit regular hours to an 8-hour workday. Here's the thing. Sometimes there are different types of jobs that require a 10 to 12-hour shift, sometimes a 24-hour shift. So sometimes mandating that you have a 8-hour workday is not really realistic. An example of this, I've met nurses over the years that sometimes when they work a shift at the hospital, sometimes in the ER, it's a 24-hour shift. And sometimes they will work 2 24-hour shifts to cover their full-time labor for that week, and that's just how the job is. Because sometimes it's not plausible or feasible to have an 8-hour workday. Like everybody would love to have an 8-hour workday, but it's not always possible. And here's the thing, just because something is not always possible, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is illegal, is my point. But see, unfortunately, trade unions, they like to make it seem like, hey, if it's not an 8-hour workday, then, it's just all bad and you must not care about the worker. That's not true. That's not true at all. In fact, most employers very much care about their workers. The next point they had was end child labor and strictly enforce the child labor law. Here's the thing. I am all for children not working, but here's the thing. Now, I'm speaking from someone, from a point of view from someone that is from Oklahoma, okay? Here in Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma, and I would say the states of Kansas and Texas, used to be predominantly farming communities. So before the child labor law went into effect, it was very common for everyone in a family to be working. Why? Because most people worked on their farms. That was just how it was. So one of the bad things about the child labor law is that when these children were no longer allowed to work, almost every single one of these working families had a decrease in income by 30 to 50%. So, yes, I understand a lot of jobs around the turn of the century were dangerous for children, but they were also dangerous for adults as well. let me say this as well. Here in Oklahoma, we still have mom and pop shops, not as dangerous as like farming industry, that kind of thing, because things are more mechanized now, but we do still have a lot of mom and pop shops and their kids work there. Because one day their children will inherit the business. So yes, I am very much for children going to school, and I'm against, child labor. But here's another thing. There are a lot of kids, they need to work in their family industry in order to understand their industry that they're in. That's just how it is sometimes. Not every job is super dangerous. And here's another thing. Here in Oklahoma, I don't know if it's like this in Kansas or Texas, but here in Oklahoma, you can actually apply for a working permit when you are 14. So that's 2 years early, prior to when you turn 16, because usually you can't work until you're 16. Well, here in Oklahoma, if you have a special exemption or a special circumstance or whatever, you can actually start working at the age of 14 and earn a living or earn an income. And I think that's great because a lot of kids love to work and they want to start earning a living. I think that's a great thing. So just know that there's two sides to a lot of things here. So also, with the child labor law, a lot of kids were forced to go to public school. And I don't mean forced in a negative way, it's just that they were forced to no longer work and then go to school. And then sometimes they went to high school, sometimes they did not. Because a lot of kids, once they reached age 14 or 15, they dropped out of school. Because they need to go back home and work. Because they needed to help provide for the family that they had. That's just how it was back then. So times have changed. Like now we kind of have more of the quote unquote nuclear family, which I don't even like that term really because it's a lie. It's a term that came out of the 1950s where basically you have the parents of the baby boomers, a lot of them, they come home from the war, they get married, and a lot of them are able to be in the middle class because we have a huge boom in terms of our economy, and so now they can have more kids and be able to afford to have them. But then what's interesting is that the more things became affordable and the more money people could make, the less children they wanted to have. So typically the nuclear family is a mom and a dad, a male and a female, not two women, not two men, because that's not a family, that's just disturbing. So you have a male and a female, husband and a wife, and they typically have about 1 to 2 kids. It's very rare for me to meet people that have more than 2 children. And see, that's considered the nuclear family. So that's just kind of how it is these days. The next goal that this labor union had was have adequate scales to weigh the coal products so workers could be paid fairly. So we talked about that where stupidly and unfortunately these workers were getting gypped based on the people that were operating the mine, the managers working there, were affecting the scales and the weight so that way the workers would not get paid what they should have been paid. Okay, that is stealing, that is thievery. And so these people, they should have very much taken that up with the labor department, whether within their state or at a federal level. Because, just because this happened at one mine, that doesn't mean it happened at every mine. Like you can't just have a blanket statement, oh, all coal mining operations are bad. That's not true. Like we know that's not true because some places people very much enjoy working there. So it's just how it is. Not every employer is perfect, just like how not every employer is bad. The next goal that they have is payment should be made in legal tender. I agree with that. Next one was establish unbiased public police forces in the mine areas that were not controlled by the operators. And this is very unfortunate that this stuff happened, what I am about to say. Many operators hired private police who were used to harass the mine workers and impose company power. In company towns, I hope this isn't true, but it wouldn't surprise me. It says in company towns, the operators owned all the houses and controlled the police force. They could arbitrarily evict workers and arrest them unjustly. Here's the thing. I understand that probably did happen, but you handle it appropriately. So here's the thing. If you have bad police forces or if you have a dirty cop, sometimes you have to go up the chain of command to get things to change. See, because here's the thing. A lot of corruption starts from the top down, not the bottom up. So in this particular case, I just wish they had hired a lawyer and or sued City Hall for this stuff. Because it's ridiculous that these mining operations, they were able to hire, sometimes an entire police force in a town just to be horrible to these mine workers. I mean, I hope and pray that's not true, but in some areas it wouldn't surprise me. Because sometimes small towns are very corrupt. I don't like it, but that's how it is. But needless to say, there are things that you can do, like there are laws already on the books on how to handle corruption that occurs at a public level, meaning like in the public sector. And what I mean by that is that police forces are paid with tax dollars. That's why they are public servants. They're not private servants, they're public servants, meaning our tax dollars pay their wages. So being that our tax dollars pay their wages, they should have never been allowed to operate like that. Because they are receiving a federal or a state pension, typically. So needless to say, there are rules, laws, and regulations about how to hold someone accountable for the unjust things that they do, especially when they are supposed to serve and protect the public, not just a particular corporation. The next and last one, in terms of their goals, was the workers reserve the right to strike, but would work with operators to reach reasonable conclusions to negotiations. Here's the thing. They do have the right to strike, but very rarely are they reasonable in terms of their conclusions in regards to negotiations. Trade unions tend to be very much not in line with what is happening in the community, in their industry, or in the economy of the United States. I don't know how they view Canada. I don't know what they can get away with up there because Canada is socialist. So, needless to say, Canada probably loves a lot of things that they do that are corrupt. Because socialists love other people's money. So, that's very disappointing there, but they did have several strikes. In the 1890s, they had 4 strikes. In the 1900s, they had quite a few. I'll just list off a few. They had the coal strike of 1902. They had the 1903 Colorado coal strike. They had the 1908 Alabama coal strike. They had the Westmoreland County coal strike in 1910 and 1911, and that took place in Pennsylvania. Then you have the Colorado Coalfield War, which occurred in September 1913 to December 1914. Then you had the Hartford Coal Mine Riot that occurred in July 1914. Then you had the United Mine Workers Coal Strike of 1919. Then you have the 1920 Alabama Coal Strike. And then Nova Scotia, they had about 2 or 3 coal strikes in the 1920s. So, I'm not going to go into each individual one because it's really long, but here's the thing. I can understand why they would strike, especially in regards to safety, working hours, and pay. Here's the thing, though. Whenever they go on strike, especially during this time frame, because this is around the turn of the century, here's the thing. Coal was used for a lot of things during that time. Coal was used as a source of energy to heat your home, to heat the stove so you can cook your food. It was used for railroads. It was used for so many things. So for this union to go on strike that many times, I think is ridiculous, and I think it's really, I think it shows you that they don't really care about their neighbor, because here's the thing. They obviously had a very important job back then because coal was used for a lot of different things. So needless to say, they very much knew that when they went on strike, they were affecting the entire United States, not just their local area, but the entire country. So that tells me they did not care about the rest of the United States. So that tells me they very much overvalue their labor, which is typically why these days coal miners are overpaid. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have risk with the job. They do. It's just a naturally dangerous job. It's no different than people that work on oil rigs and things of that nature. Like, it's just how it is. I mean, think about our military. Their job is very dangerous, and they don't make hardly as much as what these coal miners make, or I would say electrical workers and things of that nature. Like, a lot of these trade unions, Sometimes they make way more money than our military people, and they put their life on the line every day. Like, they don't just work an 8-hour shift. It's 24/7. So, I mean, here's the thing. You know, everybody has a violin, but not everybody plays it at the same volume. Unfortunately, these trade unions, they tend to play it really loud, and there are some things I agree with them on, but, you know, here's the thing. Like, I can agree with them on safety standards and things of that nature, but I don't agree with them going on strike like this. See, here's the thing. If there's a safety issue, then you hire someone, you reach out to someone to invent something to help your work become safer. You don't just say, oh, I'm not showing up. You know, I'm not going to show up until you invent something. Like, that's the dumbest thing to do, because you're hurting yourself, you're hurting the industry, and then you're hurting the economy. And I think that is very selfish, but, you know, these trade unions, they tend to be very selfish anyway, because they tend to only care about their labor and nobody else's, which is very unfortunate. But I will go ahead and end this podcast, but as usual, until next time, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, that you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you so much. God bless, and bye-bye.